Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we're lifelong Catholics. And what we do is all for free, and for the love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church. And we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today, we're going to finally tell you the real life story of Rene Lefebvre, the father of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, the founder of the Society of St. Pius X, and the details the society should have told you about long ago. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Ordo Militaris Radio TV. Your unique Catholic apostolate, we talk about everything in the light of faith, and especially your historical shows, your programs, where we talk about things of history that every Catholic should know, but almost none of us does, because the clergy don't talk about it, and maybe some would even say they hid it from us. But I think most of the clergy don't know either, because you're not taught this in seminary. So what this show is based on a book that every Catholic should have as for its historical value of mentioning the Archbishop's father. What is this book, AJ? Show them, tell them about it. Okay, and if you could read out the title to those.
All's Fair, the story of the British Secret Service behind the German lines by Captain Henry Landau.
Now, this is a fascinating book. I mean, who has ever read anything about spies in the First World War? First World War, we recently celebrated the 100th anniversary of its ending in 2019, and it was a horrible tragedy. Both my grandfathers were in the army in the First World War, one in the U.S. Army and one in the Italian. And so I have some connection, though thankfully both didn't see action. That's why I exist. But a little background on Henry Landau, since we're going to be reading from his book. He was born on the 7th of March, 1892. He was a South African World War I volunteer. He had studied at Caius College, Cambridge, and just got his degree in medicine. So he joined he signed up when the war began and worked in the medical care, ambulance corps. And then he joined the artillery corps. And after dating a woman who was connected with MI6, he was recruited into the spy network and became the leader of their spy network in Europe. He served under Captain Mansfield Smith Cumming, and he handled a group called La Dame Blanche, which was a code name for their spy organization because Germany was under the emperor of the Hohenzollern family, and according to tradition, Hohenzollerns would be taken down by a white lady. La Dame Blanche means the white lady. And after the war, he left the British Secret Service, went back to South Africa, then emigrated to the United States and wrote several books and became kind of a pariah, a persona non grata with British intelligence because he revealed so much. This is a very interesting book from someone who appears to be obviously impartial, and is going to be telling us the facts. And we're reading from this book because it actually mentions the Archbishop's father. But first, we'll talk something about this spy network. AJ, where do you want to begin?
Yeah, so he writes, when the Belgian frontier was comparatively open, all these other services justified their existence by having important organizations working for them in the interior, but with increased German surveillance, communication across the frontier became so difficult that my agents had in their hands practically the only frontier passages that were capable of effective service at all. The chiefs of the Belgian and British General Headquarters services from their desks in France kept spurring their agents in Holland onto fresh efforts. When they found that they were unsuccessful, they started intrigues against us, accusing us of lack of cooperation and of monopolizing the frontier. The passages, the best agents in Holland. The proof of all this is that when I arrived in Holland in 1916 the British Secret Service did not have a single agent in the occupied territory, or a single frontier passage. The Franken-Ghoul service had broken down completely. The other Allied services had 2 years start before I replaced the Frankie-Ghoul. Then we were so much more successful than they were. There must have been something radically wrong with their methods. In addition to this, pressure was brought to bear on the Belgian Railway Administration in Havre to call up the Belgian railwaymen in our employ for service on the railways behind the Belgian front, and a letter of censure was written to Orum's father, who, as I have explained, was one of the administrative heads of the Belgian railways before the war. Here again we pulled wires until we managed to keep our own men with us. The Belgian service had no justifiable reason for their action, as the men in our employ were rendering infinitely greater service to the Allied cause, working for us in Holland, than they could have done by fighting as soldiers in the trenches or working on the railways in France.
Okay, so now for those of you who aren't familiar with World War I, it breaks out in 1914, and the Germans did something dastardly. They invaded a neutral country, Belgium, so they could get to France. They attempted to encircle the French capital, and they got pretty darn close to it. But Belgium was never entirely conquered. They always held a small bit of land over near Calais, and right along that front line is a town called Lille, where their family of Archbishop Lefebvre is from. Netherlands was not invaded. Netherlands was neutral in the First World War, and both sides respected its neutrality. So it was a base of operation for British intelligence and French intelligence. And so when you hear the word Holland, think of the Netherlands, because the Holland is the coastal district of the Netherlands. And the British ran their spy network out of Rotterdam, didn't they? Which is the big port there on the Rhine.
Yeah.
So what Landau just says here, we need some explanation. Why are the Belgians so kind of jealous about the British running a spy network in occupied Belgium? Well, because they had just been invaded by the Germans. And so rightfully, they feel that, their national sovereignty is being threatened and everyone should respect it. So it's only understandable that during the war, they would be a bit piffed that the British are trying to start a spy network in their country since they already had one.
Yeah. So, now, does this mean that when we going to hear about Lefebvre, was he a Mason? And to be high level in MI5 or MI6? Yes. You had to be a Freemason, and this is from a book I put into the SSPX, the Gladio Operation Shell. And I quote from the introduction of the acknowledgements. I am free to name only a small number of the many hundreds of people who have helped me with advice and information. Most of those who helped me did so only on the understanding that I would say nothing that could lead to their identification. Among these were many Freemasons who feared recrimination from other members of the Brotherhood. Others included government officials, politicians, judges, policemen of all rank, lawyers, churchmen, past and present officers of MI5 and MI6. And that.
Okay, so and that's the title of that book?
And I'm getting to it. Bear with me, folks. Let's see there. From the book, The Brotherhood, The Secret World of Freemasons.
Okay, so it is a well-known fact that the entire society of the United Kingdom is Masonic. Like many countries of Italy and France today, you cannot hold high positions in government unless you are members of the Masons. They monopolize the position. For example, in the French Parliament, 53% of the parliamentarians are Freemasons, even though the number of Freemasons in all of France is less than 0.5% or less than 1%. So these countries aren't democracies, they're Masonic tyrannies. and you just don't get in. And if you were going to be promoted or even trusted, you would be asked to join the lodge, and if you didn't, you wouldn't be. Okay, so that's absolutely clear. So it is to be presumed that everyone working for MI6 would be Freemasons, and that would be how the British would recruit spies in Belgium. That is only a supposition, or I should say an inference, but we'll show that there's solid reason to hold that it was the case that the Archbishop's father was a Freemason at a high level.
So, Rene Lefebvre was the chief of French Secret Service in Holland during the First World War.
Is this the testimony of Landau?
Yes.
What does he say exactly? And what page are you on, so people who would like to check this?
Page 136. Our relations with the French were excellent. I know of no single instance when we clashed. Lefebvre, their head man in Holland, was willing to leave the field to us. His chief, Colonel Wallner, at French General Headquarters, realized the situation, and to him belongs the credit for not badgering his local representative into activities harmful to us.
Okay, and I'll back that up by a quote from the Wikipedia article, Marcel Lefebvre. His father ran aspiring for British intelligence when Tourcoing, his hometown, was occupied by Germans during the World War I. Rene died at age 65 in 1944, although this, like most things in Wikipedia, is misinformation, because it makes you think the father was running aspiring in Tourcoing and not in Holland. And that quotes the Holocaust Survivors Victim Database as evidence of that quote.
And in the back on page 326 in the index, Lefebvre, chief of the French Secret Service in Holland.
Okay, so this is no small office. Okay, this means you're a spy master. This means you know the names of all the spies under you. You're completely trusted. And in the Masonic regime of France, that would be impossible unless you were a Freemason. Now, remember, in 1903, the Masonic government of France confiscated all the churches of France. So no Catholic of any decent stamp would even take a position in the French government. For another 20, 30 years, it was an outrage that they robbed the properties of France. And why would you even defend a country like that? And I don't want to say that Catholics couldn't be patriots, but nevertheless, that's outrageous. So it would be impossible, I think, to argue just from no evidence that he wasn't a Mason. You would just basically have to say it's absolutely certain just because of that. Now, what did this spy ring do during the war in general, AJ? You looked at the book.
They were gathering intelligence on the movements of the movements of Germany. They were keeping their eyes and ears on what the German Secret Service was doing. They were also spying on the Russians.
Okay. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the First World War, there was almost no continual air cover. I mean, airplanes had only been introduced in this war, I think in 1915, and they were still just putting around the front lines. They weren't used for long-range intel gathering, photographing installations like there were in the Second World War. So aspiring in the First World War was absolutely necessary to know what the enemy was doing behind the lines, whether he was moving up ammunition and artillery here or there, because without that, you wouldn't be able to anticipate his moves on your own front line. So this is all these spy masters were men of the highest trust and involved most intimately in the war effort.
Yeah, and when I was reading this stuff to you when we were setting this thing up, we tried to track it down to where exactly a part of the government he was working with in the First World War deal of the French government. The Duxamin Bureau.
Duxian Bureau, which means the second bureau. Oh, can you tell us something about that?
Okay, so the second bureau of the General Staff was the France External Military Intelligence Agency from 1871 to 1940. It was dissolved together with the Third Republic upon the armistice with Germany. However, the term Duxamin Bureau, like MI6 and KGB, outlived the original organization as a general label for the country's intelligence service. And during that time, it was under Georges Clemenceau, President de Clemenceau, with complete control of Interior Ministry funding. It created special counter-espionage units, the Brigades de Tigre, reference to Clemenceau's nickname, commanded by the police commissioner Celestin Hennion. The mobile brigades were handled special operations of the judicial police. Then they grew into different sections and grew with more little extra power to handle propaganda and spying and everything.
Okay, so now Tourcoing, the hometown of the Lefebvre family, is a industrial town near Lille, and it's right on the French-Belgian border. It's on the French side of the border. But because of the textile industry factory, because Archbishop Lefebvre's father ran a textile factory, he probably had a lot of commercial connections with the Netherlands, and that's probably why he was spymaster in the Netherlands, because you put your spymasters normally in safe places, while the whole network is in the enemy territory. So that means that Lefebvre was out of house during the war, and Rene Lefebvre, that is, and would have come back only after the war, and no doubt told his family all what he was doing. Everyone probably knew what he did. So if we look at the timeline of Marcel Lefebvre, we see that you really can't deny this narrative. Marcel Lefebvre was born the 29th of November 1905. So when the war breaks out, he's 9 years old. He would have noticed his father disappearing. He was the age of reason. He would have known his father was gone 4 years. He would have known what his father was doing. He was living in France and probably was moved away from the front line during the war. So he was in a safe place. He was under no threat. So the war ends in 1919, and 4 years later, Lefebvre goes to study for the priesthood. And here I'm reading from Linkopedia's article. At the insistence of his father, he followed his brother to the French seminary in Rome. So his father's a spy master. AJ, what do you think is the likelihood that his son at this point had been recruited into the spy network?
Highly likely, highly.
Especially this insistence to study at Rome, because at Rome, a French agent could gain all kinds of intelligence for the French intelligence agency. So he goes to the French seminary in Rome, and I don't know who this brother is, so if anyone knows the life of Marcel Lefebvre, leave a note in the show notes here and tell us who is this brother. We'd like to look him up too. So his father sends him to the French seminary in Rome, even though his father knows that it's a site of liberal teachings. Now, you could say you don't like that, but if you're a Freemason, that's just a fraud, because the Freemasons have a goal of spreading liberal teachings in the Catholic Church and breaking down the Catholic faith. Okay, so if you send your son there, you can't really complain about what the teaching is, right? Especially if you insist. You're in French intelligence, you would know what's going on in that seminary. You could pick up the phone, call someone in Paris, and he could tell you all about it. So there's no excuse. It's not like your average dad who may not know. The second thing about it is that Archbishop Lefebvre, Marcel Lefebvre, was ordained a deacon on the 25th of May, 1929 by Cardinal Basilio Pompili in the Basilica of St. John Lateran. And this is important. First, for the two things, let me point out that the Wikipedia article misspells the cardinal's name, so you couldn't find him on CatholicHierarchy.org. But I found him because I've seen that name before. So Cardinal Basilio Pompili traces his lineage back to another cardinal of the same family, Dorio Pompili, in the 18th century. But if you look at the co-consecrators of Cardinal Basilio Pompili, they are both Freemasons of the House of Rampolla di Tindaro, the arch Freemason, whose Episcopal descendants are the Mafia of St. Colin. And we've talked about this in a previous show, and this explains why Pope Francis is very friendly to Society of St. Pius X, but persecutes any non-Society of St. Pius X organization. Okay, so he's ordained a deacon by a Freemason. Then he's ordained a priest by the Bishop of Lille, Achille Leinart, who is a known Freemason. Then he's consecrated a bishop years later by Leinart again, a known Freemason. So, AJ, is it even credible to suppose that Marcel Lefebvre was not a Freemason?
He had to be a Freemason.
I mean, okay, let's say his father was not a Freemason, but he was in French Secret Service. He could have asked his father for a list of all the Freemasons in the clergy and made sure he wasn't ordained anything by any of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what any Catholic of that age would have done.
Yeah.
It was a hot topic because the Freemasons were excommunicated. If you were ordained by a Freemason under the 1917 Code of Canon Law, your consecration would be illicit. It would still be valid, but it would be illicit. If you knew what he was a Freemason, you were involved in a sacrilege. And how could he not know? His father's the head of a French intelligence network. He couldn't possibly not know. And yet he chooses 3 Freemasons to become deacon, priest, and bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the council, he starts this operation called the Society of St. Pius X, with money out of Eastern Switzerland, which is like a Nazi stronghold, that runs a chain of hotels for the elites of France, and whose society never told us this. Yeah. Never told us at all. It's only coming out now, long after the man's dead. So, you know.
And so the war ends. Lefebvre, probably goes back to, textile work. But when the war comes back again in World War II, he rejoins the Central Bureau of Information and Action. But this was founded by General de Gaulle in 1940, in July. And again, he joins up again, which was connected with MI5, MI6, the counter-espionage, created December 16, 1941, directed by Roger Warren, Stanislas Mangin, Francois Thierry, then by Commander Bonnefosse in 1943. Section intended to detect and eliminate enemy agents, infiltrate in the Vice's Intelligence Office of Resistance in France and London. To this end, this section is responsible for the central file, the preliminary interrogation of rivals, centralization of information on individuals, and liaison with the British Security Service. And this is the one where you can also get agents out of France, which was his job in the Second World War.
Okay, so Archbishop's father, Rene Lefebvre, was so committed to the spycraft that he immediately joined, even years later, when he was an older man, the spy networks of France. And I think it's Landau's book, doesn't he say that when the spy network was created only, oh no, it wasn't, it's in the article on La Dame Blanche on Wikipedia. It says that when the Second World War broke out, and the British revived La Dame Blanche, and only a few previous members joined. So that means that Lefebvre is one of the most intimate collaborators in the MI6 operation. And as again, that would only be possible if he's a Freemason and if they trusted him as a Freemason. Now, what have we been told for 40 years? We've been told that Marcel Lefebvre was a supporter of the Vichy government. That was pro-Nazi and anti-Ally. That's what we were told. But the truth is not entirely that. His father was working for de Gaulle, who was a known socialist, an enemy of the Catholic Church, and one of the most despicable men involved in corrupting France after the Second World War, an ally of the Soviet Union. So, the entire narrative of the founding of the Society of St. Pius X is just crumbling to dust. If his father was a spy master, he might himself been a spy master. The Society of St. Pius X might be a French intelligence operation. Its priests might be spies for the French government. And this is no small thing, because if you're going to confession to these people, what you say to them might end up written down in some bureau at Paris.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating this, because why does Paul VI not make Marcel Lefebvre a cardinal after his heroic service in Africa? Maybe there's a lot of propaganda about that, saying Paul VI didn't like Archbishop Lefebvre, but maybe Paul VI knew that he was French intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the reason why he wasn't made a cardinal. And maybe this is the real motive he founds the Society of St. Pius X, as kind of a vendetta against the church for having uncovered him.
Mm-hmm.
This would explain why he ordains pedophiles and sends them to Gabon in the United States to rape children for 10, 20, 30 years, and why his bishops have been covering this up for 40, 50 years. I mean, we can't deny the fact that the Latin Mass is the true Mass, but some people might be using it for highly ulterior motives.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, AJ, for doing this program, and I encourage everyone to get a copy of Landau's book, learn about the spy networks in the First World War. And if anyone out there has more information on the Deuxième Bureau and Rene Lefebvre, please leave a comment in the notes. And because AJ was so zealous, he'll pick up the books, and we'll talk about this more, because AJ is the only Catholic apostolate talking about this and investigating this, and every Catholic has the right to know what's really going on in the church, and these are facts that we should have been told.
Yeah. Thank you for watching today's episode of OMC Radio TV. If you wish to support OMC Radio TV, please join the studio fundraiser. More importantly, please join Ordo Militaris Catholicus as either a donor or an investor. This way, the important work of defending persecuted Christians can continue. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.